You are entering the Niliverse with your hosts Gustavo Candia and Rodney Perry. This episode has been brought to you by the Society of Namecoin. No. All right, there we are.
Okay, good. Well, good morning.
Good morning, Rodney.
So we're entering into something that's very pithy relative to the whole book. We're beginning to talk about the difference between nothing and nothingness, and so we're entering into a really interesting section of the book. Well, there's a couple things I just thought I would say. That one is we're beginning by looking into various what religions have had to say about nothing, and it's a little complex, and this section's a little bit long, and I would just invite our listeners to read the book in this section, and there's because it's not the kind of information that we can verbally go through with the very specifics of research in various traditions throughout the world and so forth. So if this is intriguing to people, then I would suggest they read this section of the book, and you'll find it, I think, fascinating. It was a very long and arduous research, and I think we simplified it and categorized it in ways that nobody's ever done before. So interesting area. Mm-hmm. So the general notion here is that we are beginning to differentiate between nothing and nothingness. And we're going to look to the religious traditions of the world in order to see what they have to say about nothing and nothingness. And what we found immediately right off the top was those schools of theology that move according to what they call the via negativa, the negative way, have the most fruit when we're looking into the relationship of nothing and nothingness, because these I should say there's another word involved here. Those theologies that move with the via negativa are called apophatic theologies. Apophasis basically just means to deny. So that the negative way, the way of denial, it's just two different words. But the word apophatic comes up throughout, especially Western theology, apophatic theology. There's one basic notion that apophatic theology says. It's basically saying that God's essence is ineffable. Mm-hmm. That language cannot capture the true nature of God. And when we're talking about the apophatic theologies, God has many names throughout the world. Allah, Ayin in the more mystical versions of Judaism, God, and so forth. Those traditions, apophatic traditions, will correlate God with nothing. And so very, very interesting theology. Not a theology that's commonly known in the pews of Western churches, but very interesting theology. Mm-hmm. And so God is ineffable, nothing is ineffable. And we are, you'll note that the subtitle of our book, is Toward an Apophatic Science. So what we've done is we've borrowed from the traditions of religion, and we have, in doing this study, we have come to a very clear, simple conclusion. Popularizers of science would be better scientists if they understood the notion of apophasis, that there are certain aspects of the world that are not and never will be amenable to rational thinking. Right. And that acceptance actually makes you more understanding of the nature of the world, not less. You aren't accepting a mystery, but you are understanding the nature of the mystery. And we'll go into that a little bit later when you do the hop section.
Right.
Anyway, so that's sort of where we are. So I just want to mention one more thing, and that is about if you do look into the writing about apophasis, about apophatic theology and so forth, you will notice a lot of very contradictory, stepping on your own feet kind of language. And I just want to note one here. There's a book called Apophatic Bodies. It's by writers Basil and Keller. And they say this: the more they speak, meaning theologians, the more they speak, the more they unspeak. And yet, because of the infinity of which they speak, it would seem that they can never stop speaking.
Mm-hmm.
That's the kind of language you run into when you study apophatic theology. Contradictory, stepping on one's own feet. And our approach in writing Nothing and Nothing was to never get into this kind of facile wordplay.
Mm-hmm.
We stay away from nothing jokes, although a lot of them are really funny.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever I talk to my colleagues about what we've been doing, they immediately come up with great jokes about
Right.
how much time I spend on nothing and so forth.
Yes.
We don't ever go into the jokes of nothing. We never go into the contradictory language of nothing, because it gets to the point where it just confuses readers. It confuses people. It doesn't do any good. So one thing that we can notice is that the via negativa, that just means the negative way, it's a way.
Mm-hmm.
It's very consciously put together as a way to help you learn more about the nature of God, more about the nature of nothing. It's not simply a contradictory wordplay, but it is in fact a way to understand beyond the words that we're actually speaking.
Right.
It's a way of understanding beyond language, even though nothing cannot be uttered. It's ineffable, as they say. It can't be uttered. The words are very helpful means of helping you understand that which is beyond language. So that's one thing that we can clearly say. No facile wordplay, no stepping on our feet with words, and realizing that this discussion of nothing is actually a way to understand nothing, even though that understanding will not be within the words itself. So that's the kind of just a little bit of introduction about, I think we worked really hard to make it clear and positive how people can look into the nature of nothing. So I thought maybe you could do the hop section now about because it helps here.
Relevant to this, and I wanted to just remind the readers that my initial sort of jump into Nothing and Nothingness came with this facile wordplay, right? It came from that, and this confusion created by Lawrence Krauss with his nothing, universe from nothing, right?
Right.
I knew that he was misusing the word nothing, right? And so we needed a positive, right? We needed science deals in positive things, or positive being things that exist, right? Things that are real, right? So we needed to replace the predicate nothing with something real, because nothing is ineffable, or that's what one would reserve, right, for nothing. So to speak of a universe from nothing, it kind of doesn't make sense, at least in any strict logical sense, right? So we needed to introduce a term that was a positive, or a real thing, and that was an empty state. And if you go to the dictionary, right, you'll see that nothingness is that state of emptiness, right? That we use to denote the nothing that we can speak of, right? So with that, I guess we're going to hop on pop, and today's popularizer of science is none other than Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Yeah.
Very, very popular scientist who's out there doing great things for the dissemination of scientific understanding for the masses. He's very well spoken and very clear-headed in in the science and in his ability to translate the science, right, and the math, the hard math, the language of science, right, to common everyday English, right, for people through demonstration and videos and such. So here's one of the videos that he's speaking with. I don't know who the interviewer here is, but the video's on the God of the gaps,
Right.
And let's see what Neil deGrasse Tyson has to say.
I think you must realize that some people.
Oh, sorry, 1 second. Let me share screen here. 1 second.
It's Bill Moyers, isn't it?
Bill Moyers?
Well, I don't know. I can't remember.
Yeah, I've seen him before. I don't know his name.
I've watched so many videos recently. I can't remember which one we're watching. Let's see when he comes on.
Okay.
Yeah, Bill Moyers.
Got it? You got it right now?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, here we go.
I think you must realize that some people are the career show utilitarian. And they're going to say, those scientists have discovered God. Because God, dark matter, is what holds this universe together. Was that a question? It's a statement. You know they're going to say.
So the history of discovery, particularly cosmic discovery, but discovery in general, scientific discovery, is one where at any given moment there's a frontier. And there tends to be an urge for people, especially religious people, to assert that across that boundary into the unknown lies the handiwork of God. This shows up a lot. Newton even said he had his laws of gravity and motion, and he was explaining the moon and the planet. He was there. He doesn't mention God for any of that. And then he gets to the limits of what his equations can calculate. He says, can't quite figure this out. Maybe God steps in. That's where he invoked God. And Ptolemy, he bet on the wrong horse, but he was a brilliant guy. He formed a geocentric universe with Earth in the middle. This is where we got epicycles and all this machinations of the heavens. There was still a mystery to him. He looked up and uttered the following words: when I trace at my pleasure the windings to and fro of the heavenly bodies. These are the planets going through retrograde and back. The mysteries are there. When I trace at my pleasure the windings to and fro of the heavenly bodies, I no longer touch earth with my feet. I stand in the presence of Zeus himself. Take my foot. What he did was invoke. He didn't invoke Zeus to account for the rock that he's standing on or the air he's breathing. It was this point of mystery. And in gets invoked God. This, over time, has been described by philosophers as the God of the gaps. If that's where you're going to put your God in this world, then God is an ever-receding pocket of scientific ignorance. If that's how you're going to invoke God, if God is the mystery of the universe, these mysteries, which we're tackling these mysteries one by one. If you're going to stay religious at the end of the conversation, God has to be more to you than just where science has yet to tread. So to the person who says, maybe dark matter is God, if the only reason why you're saying it's because it's a mystery, then get ready to have that undone.
All right, so let's stop sharing. He's pretty convincing, right? Like, I mean, he seems pretty confident, and he's even bringing out some poetry, right? Like, so it's, I know that you like that. Maybe if you have something to say about that, then that'd be great. I wanted to just concentrate on this God of the gaps and the idea of invoking God where we do not know, right? As deGrasse Tyson says, the God is a God that is in an ever-receding pocket of scientific inquiry, right?
Right. That's
okay. Right. Well, let me ask, Mr. Tyson the following, right? Or Dr. Tyson the following. Isn't it true that the universe of today is far larger than that of the ancients, and that of the ancients understood it to be, or both physically larger, right? But more importantly, our understanding of its true extent?
Right.
Of course, right?
That's right.
Yeah. So long as the rate at which we become aware of questions we don't have answers to, or the things that we know we don't know, right, is greater than the rate at which we can answer questions, then there's no problem with finding a God in the set of gaps. So not a God of the gaps, a God of the set of gaps.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Right? Because there will not only always be gaps if you sort of concede the previous proposition, right? That the rate at which, right, questions, right, our universe faster than the answers, right? And if you subscribe to that, then there will always be gaps, right?
Right.
But it gets worse, right? Because the gaps will be increasingly difficult to ignore, right? So much so that I personally can imagine a time when scientific theories will need to be stated with boundary conditions in order to be useful. Right? So no longer will they be able to sort of talk about theories of everything or talk about sort of the theory of relativity and law of gravitation without a caveat or an asterisk beside it that says only applies here, right? Or applies here, and here.
Right.
But not universally anymore, right? Because there are just too many anomalies.
There's too many anomalies.
And this will happen. This will happen.
Right.
So let's get back to what Dr. Tyson said. That's correct, right? Of course, particular gaps will be filled all the time by science.
Right.
So one's faith in God is destined to be crushed if you need to point to particular gaps to argue for the existence of God, right? But Tyson is just strawmanning religion here, right? Or religious people here,
right?
By saying that you know people like that's what's holding their belief in God together, right? The particular gaps,
right? That's right.
Right? An atheist that thinks that science will one day do away with all gaps, right? At least those gaps closest to home, right? Clearly demonstrates his hubris and overdependence, at the very least, on the constancy of nature, right, for their worldview to be upheld, right? So gaps once filled will never pop back up in the same spot, right? So that once we've solved in this area, like what there are no new mysteries that are going to be going on here in this earth, right? Because we solved it all, right? We can move on. We can push further and further out into the universe.
That's right.
That overdependence on the constancy of nature, right, will crush them. It's just like any particular gap that you speak of.
That's right.
Okay?
That's right.
So I guess I think last week we spoke about Neuberg, right? Neuberg and
Andrew Neuberg.
Neuberg, that's right. And about like sort of his studies on neurotheology, right? How
neurotheology,
measuring sort of how the belief in something sort of actually alters the mind, right?
Right.
It forms new nerve branches, right, and synapses and so on.
That's right.
So that God actually becomes neurologically real.
That's right.
Okay?
That's right.
The same thing could potentially happen with something like unicorns and spaghetti monsters too, theoretically.
Yes,
right?
yes.
But the question is, so I hear I'm speaking to someone like maybe Tyson, or more specifically, when I mention a spaghetti monster, I'm talking to Dawkins here, right?
Yes.
Yes, you could, but could you possibly devote that much time, that much mental energy to change your brain, right? To make a spaghetti monster neurologically real. That is something that I find difficult to believe.
Right. That's right. Yeah.
And so let me just kind of wrap all this up by bringing to mind a very real effect that we scientifically sort of have demonstrated to be true, and that's the placebo effect, right?
Yeah.
A beneficial effect produced by a placebo is one that which can't be attributed to the actual thing that you ingested, right? The placebo.
With the substance, yeah.
But it's due to the fact that the patient believes in that treatment. Okay, so
Right.
that's the placebo effect. So I had this sort of turn of phrase or turn of word here that said, well, if you can't see the benefits of a placebo, right, and why it's a good thing, right?
Yes.
And emphasizing the good of the placebo effect, right, then you might have something that's more akin to a placebo effect. Placebo effect. Okay, right? And here's the placebo effect. This is a first, right? So first,
Okay.
and it's going to go out there.
Okay.
So what's the placebo effect? When the refusal to come to terms with one's ignorance, i.e. lacking the humility to believe in anything, leads to pernicious outcomes.
That's right.
Okay, so lacking the ability to believe in something, right? Staying with your logic, right? So that you don't change your brain, right? To help you, to help your fitness, leading to pernicious outcomes.
Very good.
That's the placebo effect. So you can choose which one you prefer.
It's like placebo.
I got Homer sort of in my head,
Yeah.
Homer Simpson.
That's cool. Yeah, that's another. I agree. And Tyson is actually quite generous.
Yeah.
In interpretation. He's basically saying if you want to have faith, you shouldn't have it here. You got to go elsewhere to find your faith. But if you talk with people like I think it was Sean Carroll, I can't remember, clearly Dawkins and Krauss and so forth. There. Oh, also Lisa Randall says this is that the God of the gaps is a very dangerous place because we're going to solve all the problems.
Really?
That's the hubris. We're going to solve all the problems. So the God of the gaps is a very dangerous place to be.
Right.
And the flip side, and I think the more as you were saying, the more logical, the more real position on this should be there will always be aspects of the manifest world that can't be understood rationally. So the God of the gaps is a very negative way of looking at mystery, and the via negativa, the apophatic theologies is a very positive way of looking at the mystery. One validating mystery, one negating mystery. And I just thought that spoke really that perfectly to this things that we're talking about now in the book. Well, there's also the oddity of all this is that interview by Neil deGrasse Tyson will probably get 2.6 million views.
Yeah.
So, and actually, Neil deGrasse Tyson is a very likable man.
Oh yeah.
Very open to things like that, but he gets pretty angry about anybody being religious around him. I thought that was good. I liked that, enjoyed that a lot. And there's others who do the God of the Gaps discussion, but I thought that was one of the better. The placebo.
Yeah.
So maybe we could just go one more kind of step forward here, and we'll for today. So there are, as I said before, there are apophatic strains. There are apophatic strains within all religions throughout the world. And you can look at Buddhism, you can look at Hinduism, you can look at Islam, you can look at Judaism and Christianity, and you will find apophatic strains within all of them, and very interesting area. I really enjoyed studying this kind of thing. But I thought I would just mention one. Our book goes very clearly into all the relevant research from all the traditions. But I just thought I would mention one because he's one of my favorites, Nagarjuna from Buddhism. I spent a lot of time in graduate school and later with Nagarjuna. He's an interesting man. And Nagarjuna, well, one thing is to just realize Nagarjuna is like 500 years after the Buddha. So Buddhism has become a Asia-wide phenomenon at this point, full of different schools and teachers and monastic traditions and texts and so forth, very complex. But Nagarjuna was part of what was called the Mahayana, the big boat school of Buddhism, specifically a school called Madhyamaka. Madhya means middle. So these are followers of the middle way. And in this particular case, middle means I do not assert or deny any aspect of the self or the world. I do not assert or deny. And in that non-assertion and non-denial, they are saying that they are reinforcing what we're talking about today, that the essential nature of the world cannot be brought into words. And so any assertion or any denial is obviously incorrect. Anyway, he was a great debater at Nalanda University, a great, one of the wonderful ancient universities of the world up in northern India. And he took on what he called himself a destroyer of Vaikuntaka, a destroyer. And by that he meant that he would come into the debate culture was complicated and huge within Buddhism at this point. And within the debate culture, he was called a prasangika. Prasangika means it's what in the West is called reductio ad absurdum. You take the opponent's position and you just reduce it to an absurd point, so it can't be upheld. And right. That's what he was into. So he called himself a destroyer. He never put out a positive assertion. He came to a debate and never put out a positive assertion. He would just receive the assertions of his opponents and reduce them to meaningless phrases. So anyway, a very interesting character. Big, I mean, people in China and Tibet often call him the second Buddha. He's a huge character within the realm of Buddhist history. So there were two kind of main tenets of this school, and one we've talked about before. Shunya means empty, and it was saying that neither the self nor the world has any particular essence to it. It's always empty. That's when we talk about the world as nothing and so forth. And that the things of the world come to be dependent on one another. It's a very complicated philosophy of how things come to be, that they aren't things unto themselves, but they only have existence and dependence upon one another. So in his discussion, what Nagarjuna did was to be very smart in his responses in the debate and bring his opponents to the point of silence, basically. Shut up his opponent. I mean, that's the mean way of saying it. Yeah. Bring his opponents to the point of silence. And that's where I'm bringing this all up, because we said the via negativa, the apophatic way, is a way. It has import. And Nagarjuna was a great and compassionate man. He wasn't mean by any means. He just didn't want to shut his opponents up. But what Nagarjuna was doing was showing the inability of thinking to capture the nature of nothing. And when he had done this in a very convincing way, his opponents would come to a point where thought would stop. That was at that point in time in Buddhism, in that time of the world, the quieting of thought was considered an entrance way into nirvana.
Right.
So what we have here is debate. That Nagarjuna did not believe in debate at all, but he used debate as a way of silencing thinking and allowing people to understand nothing in a deeper and better way. So just a very fascinating use of the apophatic theology. And again, the basic notion of apophatic theology is that nothing cannot be captured in words. It's ineffable.
Right.
There we go. Great idea. And you can see that throughout Christianity, Hinduism, Islam, Judaism. You can see that same sort of notion going on, that the nature of nothing is ineffable.
So
anyway.
Nagarjuna, he was not trying to just shut up his opponents, but he was just trying to demonstrate how to shut up oneself in a way, right?
That's right. And the nature of debate was so important that's what you had to enter into. So he used the context as a way of doing it. And he wrote some beautiful poems, some great texts, but we don't need to go there. I just wanted to point out the main issue. So.
All right. Well, so I guess just to wrap up, so we've been talking about nothing. Have we been talking about nothing? Well, and here's like sort of where we want to be careful, right, with our words, right, and say that trying to think about anything, right, is done, the way I visualize it, is done with the self kind of, right, outside looking into the idea of the thing.
Right.
Okay, so when we say that we're talking about something, it's like I'm looking at it from afar, right?
That's right.
And this is, I think, akin to what the scientist means when they talk about their discipline being an objective discipline, right? From the scientists, from being afar, they can talk about something.
That's right.
Okay.
And that's seen as a positive relationship.
And that's a positive relationship, and useful, for sure. Right?
Absolutely.
We're not going to debate the utility of being objective for 99.9% of the things out there. For most everything, it's perfectly acceptable, right? But just like quantum mechanics demonstrates how in observing something, we disturb it, thinking about something changes it too.
That's right.
Right? In this case, again, let's stick with the analogy here. Maybe it's a chaotic. I haven't really thought about it, but maybe it is, right? The lighter the mass, the more significant the change, right? That's what quantum mechanics says, right? So making an idea out of nothing, right, so fundamentally changes its nature from a wave to a particle, so to speak.
That's right.
Right? Fundamentally changes its nature.
Changes its nature, right.
So these are like quantum ideas, okay? A quantum of an idea. So
no, that was great. I like that.
You like it?
I like that because then because nothing is so rare.
Yes.
That it would be even more affected by thinking about it.
That's right.
As opposed to like an elephant.
Yes, exactly. Right. It's more rare. The rarer the idea, right, the more likely it's to be affected by the fact that it has been made an idea.
That's right. Okay. Very cool.
In thinking about nothing, right, essentially, so then let's stick with our language here, the nihilological language here. And so in thinking about nothing, we make it nothingness, which is essentially a conceptualization empty of sensible content.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. Very good.
So how do we work around this? How do we how do we sort of deal with this, right? Well,
how do we
instead, let's talk around nothing.
All right.
Okay.
Good.
And here's where sort of another expression came to mind: beat around the bush. Right. When we beat around the bush, we're avoiding coming to the point.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. We don't approach the subject directly. That's what we mean by beating around the bush.
Right. Exactly.
Right. So that about something. So if we talk about something, we're from the outside looking in. But if we're talking around something, we're on the inside looking out.
Oh, cool.
Okay.
Nice. That's a nice image.
So
it's a new one.
We can take that and use it maybe going forward.
That's great. Yeah, I think we did it today.
Nailed it.
Cool.
Great.
Good. All right.
Thank you very much, Rodney.
All right, thank you. This was fun.
It was. We'll be here next week.
Okay. Placebo.
See
you later.
Bye. Entering the universe. Universe has been brought to you by the Society of Namecoin. Until next time,